Hello, my name is Pablo Siliceo, and this is my evidence 2, for which I am going to be explaining the case that I chose. That is a case that illustrates a democratic looking action that at first glance looks like an exercise of democratic leadership, but isn't really. We're going to see why. The case that I chose is the case of Putin 2020. In July 2020, Russia had a nationwide vote or a referendum of a set of constitutional changes. The most important change was the term reset for President Vladimir Putin. This reset allowed him to run for president again, even though he had already served the maximum number of terms under the old rules. Why did this look democratic? Well, the vote was presented as giving power to the people, and it seemed like it was a chance for citizens to decide the future of their country. However, it seemed like a democratic move, a public vote, an official procedure, and participation across the country. Why wasn't this actually democratic? You may say, well, if the people had the vote, they had the ability to give out their opinion, why wasn't this a democratic issue? Well, in reality, many experts and observers say that the process was not fair or free. The media was controlled by the government, so the public mostly heard only pro Putin messages. There was also little or no debate of campaigning from the opposition, and there was reports of pressure or on public workers and citizens to vote a certain way so they would spread this certain thing called voter coercion. The vote was used to make it legal for Putin to stay in power possibly until 2036, which is 11 years from now, and even though he had already ruled over 20 years. So why does this look like democratic but isn't really a democratic action? Well, this is explained by the fact that yes, people had the right to vote, and yes, it was a whole official thing and everything, but the same way as democracy is also viewed as a critic viewpoint of the people, where there's pros and cons to the government. Well, this wasn't ethically correct, since people didn't really have a chance to think against the government. They were either censored, they were pressured, they were threatened, and of course Putin did not make it easy on the media, so people really couldn't post about it or really talk about it without fearing for their health or their lives. So yeah, so this is the poster I've done. I'll show it here 5 seconds. If you want to pause it, go ahead. What it reads is, authoritarianism isn't always a scary sergeant. Sometimes it wears a suit and calls itself democracy. Well, we have seen in the past in our classes that an authoritarian government is, in a certain way, a leader that has a very strong control over the people. Often they have little or no respect for individual freedom, opposition, or fair elections. In an authoritarian government, one person or a small group holds most of the power. People usually can speak freely, criticize the government, or choose different leaders. Elections, if they exist, as this case, are often fake or unfair. The media is also often controlled, and the truth is hidden or twisted. The government uses fear, force, and manipulation to stay in power. This is why I want to express my concern to Russia, and out of all the case of the 2020 July reform that was being made, we can tell that even though Putin had or more like the government had the ability to give people the right to vote to seem as a democratic party, it really isn't the case. And that's why this is so jointed to our evidence one, which we're going to talk about later. The thing is, this case is that there is a democratic party, they give out people the right to vote, but at the end it becomes a authoritarian government, since it chooses to have all these different measures to control the vote that doesn't really give out any chance to any opposition to work throughout. So how is this related to the evidence one? Well, in our evidence one, we had we had as an objective to give out a certain number of interviews with different questions to open up our thinking and see how the text community, or in general the community, was thinking about democracy and how they may have some misconceptions about it, or things in that pathway. Between the questions we did in evidence one, we had defining democracy. We had also asked if democracy was the best option, if the democratic leaders are better, the implementation of democracy in Mexico and in other parts of the world, their own participation in democracy, such as debates, media, or getting information from different sources, and if they thought that their voice was heard. We had 24 interviews in different areas, just like BGB, engineering, finance, marketing. And we did not only interview students, we also interviewed parents, professors, family people, and etc. So why do we think that people confuse or misunderstand this case as a democratic leadership? Well, as I just explained before, a lot of people believe that democracy is only part of, well, the misconception I threw out thought was that people thought that, or not everybody, but a lot of people thought that just by the fact of being elected democratically means that you live in a democratic government, which this isn't true. As we have seen throughout the evidence too, I have argumented against this idea because, as far as I know, yes, you can be elected democratically by the people by a lot of tactics, but no, it is not a democratic party, since you have to implement these ideas. These ideas include inclusion, they include ethically and morally doing choices for the people, also listening to everybody and not only yourself, because there's a lot of authoritarian governments on today's day that are I'm sorry, I'm gonna say it in Spanish, se aprovechan of the people, of their money, of their tax, or of their income. And for those governments, a lot seem like they are democratic, but they do not continue to be once they're elected democratically. So what should a democratic government include? Well, a true democratic government should be based on freedom, on fairness, and participation. This will include fair and free and fair elections, a rule of law, a separation of power, a freedom of speech, so that everybody can express their own ideas, and that we can elect a representative of our community in a critical way. We should also have a respect for the opposition, since different political parties and ideas are allowed and are protected. And we should have accountability, since leaders are responsible to be people and they can be replaced. So, why the 2020 Russian reform was not democratic? It was, it allowed Vladimir Putin to stay in power potentially until 2036, which is more than 35 years in the presidency. The election process was not fair at all, since the media was controlled and there were reports of pressure and manipulation to vote yes. And there was no real opposition or open debate. So instead of sharing power or following term limits, the reform gave more power to one leader, which also tends a bit more to a dictatorship. So finally, we're going to explain why the DEI has to do with or needs to be included in a democratic leadership. So the DEI, which stands for diversity, equity, and inclusivity, no, inclusion, is essential to democratic leadership because it ensures that all voices are heard, respected, that that the value of their decision making is also respected. A true democracy depends on participation and fairness and representation, and the DEI helps create a space where people from different backgrounds can contribute equally. Without the DEI, leadership risks become biased, they become exclusive, or blind to the people to see, to their needs. Including a DEI in democratic leadership strengthens trust, improves decisions, and reflects the core values of equity and shared power. So that would be all. This is my evidence too. I hope you all enjoyed it and have a good day.